When my mother looked at me from her hospital bed and said, "You weren't the baby I brought home that day," I felt the ground disappeared beneath my feet. I had been taking care of her for 3 years, watching Alzheimer strip her away piece by piece. But I never imagined that in the middle of all that confusion, she would reveal the darkest truth of my life. My name is Meredith. I'm 58 years old, and for my entire existence, I believed I knew my own story. But it turns out the woman who raised me, the woman I called mom for almost 6 decades, held a secret so deep that not even the disease could bury it completely. There were no screams, no drama, no cinematic explosion of emotions, just her fragile, almost childlike whisper, speaking words that shattered everything I believed about myself. And now I'm here, recording this because I need to get these words out of my chest before they drown me. Because what I found out didn't just change my past, it changed who I am. And the worst part is that I can't ask her anymore. Because 2 days after that confession, my mother stopped recognizing me entirely, and I was left alone with the truth no one else can confirm. A truth that haunts me every night when I close my eyes. A truth that maybe should have stayed buried forever. Before I keep going, if this story is pulling you in as much as it pulled me into living it, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video. I need to know I'm not alone in this. Comment what you would do in my place. And stay until the end, because what's coming is far worse than you think. It all began on a Tuesday afternoon when I received a call from the General Hospital of Monterey. My mother had suffered an episode, they said. Not serious, but they needed me to come immediately. I lived 40 minutes away in a small house I bought with my divorce money, and I was in the middle of a work meeting when the phone rang. I canceled everything, grabbed my keys, and drove like a maniac down the highway, imagining the worst. Mom had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's 3 years earlier at 72, and since then, I had become her primary caregiver. My brother Roberto lived in Houston and came twice a year at best, so all the weight fell on me. When I arrived, she was sitting up in bed, staring out the window with that distant expression I knew too well. "Hi, mija," she said, smiling as if nothing had happened. Alzheimer's arrived quietly, the way the worst things do. First came the lost keys, then the mixed-up names, then the stories repeated 3 times in a single afternoon. But what truly alarmed me was the day I found her crying in the kitchen because she couldn't remember how to make enchiladas, a recipe she'd cooked her entire life. That strong, independent woman was fading right in front of my eyes. I decided to move her to an assisted living facility near my house, a decent place that cost $2,000 a month, money I could barely afford on my teacher's salary. But she was my mother, the woman who raised me alone after Dad abandoned us when I was 8. I owed her everything. Or at least that's what I believed then. Every afternoon after work, I drove to the facility to spend 2 hours with her. Some days she recognized me. Other days she called me by her dead sister's name. I brought her chocolate cookies, read magazines aloud, and talked about meaningless things. Doctors said routine helped, that familiar stimulation could slow deterioration. So I clung to that routine like a lifeline, like as long as I kept showing up, she wouldn't disappear completely. But the disease is cruel. It doesn't negotiate. Every week there was less of her and more of the shadow replacing her. And I felt powerless, furious at an enemy I couldn't fight. That night, when the hospital called, Mom had what they described as an agitation episode. She'd become violent with a nurse, yelling nonsense about a baby, about something she'd done wrong long ago. They sedated her lightly, and now she was calm, almost sleepy. I sat beside her bed and held her wrinkled hand, the same hand that stroked my forehead when I had fevers as a child. "Meredith," she said, with a clarity she hadn't shown in months. and I felt a spark of hope. I have to tell you something, Mija. Something I should have told you a long time ago. Her voice trembled, but her eyes stayed sharp, more lucid than they had been in years. And then she said it. I asked her to tell me more details. Anything that could prove this was just a hallucination from her sick mind. But she did tell me more. Details so precise they chilled my blood. She described the hospital, an old 3-story building with green tiles on the walls. She told me the baby she took, me, had a pink bracelet with the last name Delgado written on it, that she wrapped me in her own blanket and simply walked out while the nurses were busy with an emergency on another floor. No one stopped her. No one asked questions. It was 1966, she said. Security wasn't like today. She took a bus back to Monterey. My father, her then husband, never knew the truth. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake in my house with my laptop open, searching desperately for any information about stolen babies in Guadalajara in 1966. At first, nothing. But I kept searching, changing keywords, digging through digitized newspaper archives. And at 4 a.m, I found it. A short newspaper note from a local Guadalajara paper dated August 22nd, 1966. Newborn disappears from civil hospital. The Delgado family reports the theft of their 2-day-old daughter. Authorities investigate. I felt like I was going to vomit. The last name matched. The date matched. Everything matched. It wasn't a hallucination. It was real. Horribly, undeniably real. I spent the next few days obsessed, searching for everything I could find about the Delgado family. I found birth records, obituaries, old addresses. I learned that the parents, Eduardo and Carmen Delgado, had died years ago. He in 1995, she in 2003. But they had other children, 2 older than me, my biological siblings. The thought felt heavy and strange in my mind. One was named Javier and still lived in Guadalajara. The other, Sofia, had moved to the United States. I had their names. I could find them. I could call them and say their stolen sister was alive. But how do you make a call like that? How do you tell someone you've been alive all this time while they mourned you? I visited Mom again 2 days later, needing answers, needing to understand why she did it. But when I walked into her room, she looked at me with empty eyes and asked who I was. The moment of clarity was gone. The window had closed. I tried reminding her, Guadalajara, the hospital, 1966, but she only looked at me with that polite, distant smile she reserved for strangers. It was as if the universe had given me one single moment to learn the truth and then snatched it away before I could fully grasp it. I sat beside her and cried silently while she hummed a song I didn't recognize. For weeks, I lived in some kind of emotional limbo, not knowing what to do with this truth burning inside me. Should I contact the Delgado family and tell them? Didn't they deserve to know their daughter was alive? But then I thought about Mom, the woman who raised me with genuine love, who worked 3 jobs to give me an education, who never made me feel anything but wanted. Would I destroy her memory by exposing that she was a kidnapper? And more selfishly, did I really want to open that door? Because once I did, there would be no going back. My entire identity would shift. Meredith Sanchez would cease to exist, replaced by someone I didn't know. Finally, in a moment of bravery, or perhaps insanity, I dialed the number I found for Javier Delgado. My hand trembled so much I almost hung up 3 times before he answered. "Hello," he said, impatiently. "My name is Meredith Sanchez, and I think I have information about your sister who disappeared in 1966. The silence on the other end was so long I thought he'd hung up. Then I heard a deep, trembling breath. "My sister, Rosalia," he said. voice breaking on the name that should have been mine. The name of the baby who died, or rather, was replaced. 3 weeks later, I sat in a cafe in Guadalajara across from Javier and his sister Sofia, who flew in from San Diego when he told her about my call. They looked at me as if I were a ghost, and in a way, I was. I showed them childhood photos, my falsified birth certificate, everything I had found. Sophia cried silently as she examined each picture. "You look like Mom," she said, touching a photo of me at 5 years old. "You have her eyes, her smile." Javier was more reserved, but I saw his hand shaking when he held the picture of my mother, the woman who had stolen me. "She can't answer for what she did," I said. "She's lost in her own mind. And I don't even know if punishment would matter anymore. She gave me a life. She loved me." Sophia opened an old folder she brought and pulled out yellowed photos. "This was taken 2 days before you were born," she said, showing me a picture of a young, pregnant woman smiling at the camera, my biological mother, Carmen Delgado. Then she showed me another photo of a tiny white casket. "For years, we thought you were the one in there," Javier explained. "They told us you died from respiratory complications. We never suspected you'd been stolen until a week later when Mom insisted something wasn't right. She said the body didn't look like you. But by then, it was too late. The remains had been cremated. There was no way to prove anything." "The search continued for years," he said. "Eventually, everyone accepted I was dead. Except Carmen. She never stopped believing I was alive somewhere." I left that meeting feeling split into 2 different people. One was Meredith Sanchez, 58, divorced, elementary school teacher, a fully formed life. The other was Rosalia Delgado, a stolen infant who should have grown up in a different family, with siblings who searched for her, with a mother who died never knowing she survived. Which one was I? Could I be both? The Delgados wanted a DNA test to confirm things legally. I agreed, though in my heart I already knew. The coincidences were too many, the details too precise. But a part of me needed scientific proof, something irrefutable, something that made this nightmare concrete. 4 weeks later, the DNA results arrived. 99.9% probability that Javier Delgado and I share biological parents. There it was, in official print. My entire life had been built on a crime. I called Javier to tell him, though he already knew from my voice. "Welcome home, Rosalia," he said, openly crying. But I didn't feel like Rosalia. I didn't know how to be Rosalia. I only knew how to be Meredith. My memories, my experiences, my identity, all tied to that name. How do you give up 58 years of being someone? How do you just decide to be someone else because a paper says so? That night, I sat in front of the mirror for hours, staring at my face, looking for traces of the Delgado family I'd never seen before. My brother Roberto, the only brother I'd ever known, flew in from Houston when I told him everything. He sat in my living room staring at me like I'd lost my mind. "This doesn't change anything, Meredith," he said firmly. "Mom is our mother. I am your brother. Period. I don't care what some paper says or what biological family shows up after 58 years. But it does change something. It changes everything. It means Mom committed a horrible crime. It means there's a family who mourned me while we celebrated birthdays." He stood up, angry. accused them of being opportunists, shouted horrible things. I stood in the middle, watching both families who now claimed me tear one another apart. Over money, over property, over material things that suddenly felt more important than truth or justice.
While all this unfolded, Mom lived in her shrinking, silent world. She spoke almost never. When I visited, she only smiled that empty, sweet smile. One afternoon, while I brushed her hair like she used to brush mine, a nurse handed me an envelope. "We found this among her belongings when organizing," she said. "It has your name." I opened it with trembling hands. It was a letter written 2 years ago in her shaky handwriting before Alzheimer's claimed her mind fully. "Meredith, if you're reading this, it means I've finally lost the battle with my mind, and maybe I told you the truth I swore to take to the grave. Forgive me, daughter. What I did was unforgivable, but I did it out of desperate love, out of a grief that was killing me. You saved me as much as I saved you. I loved you every second. Don't hate me. Mom." At the bottom of the envelope was something else, a folded old photograph. I unfolded it gently. A newborn baby with a pink hospital bracelet on her tiny wrist. I leaned closer. The bracelet read, Delgado. It was me, the physical proof my mother had kept for 58 years, the only tangible reminder of the crime she committed. Why did she keep it? Guilt? Fear? Or maybe part of her always knew the truth would surface. I looked at her frail body in the hospital bed, lost, broken, and tried to reconcile the loving mother who raised me with the desperate woman who stole a baby half a century ago. Was she a monster? A victim? Or just human? Terribly, beautifully human like all of us. I tried to bring both families together peacefully. I organized a dinner at my house, invited Roberto, Javier, and Sofia. I thought if we all sat down and talked like adults, we could navigate this impossible situation. The dinner was a disaster. Roberto barely spoke. Javier made passive-aggressive comments about the kidnapping. Sofia cried in the bathroom twice. I sat at the head of the table like a useless referee trying to keep peace in a war I couldn't win. When everyone left, I sat alone in my kitchen, surrounded by untouched food and dirty plates, and I realized something devastating. No matter what choice I made, someone would get hurt. There was no happy ending waiting for me, only different shades of loss. Mom died on a quiet Tuesday in October, 3 months after her confession. I was holding her hand when she exhaled her final breath, and in that moment I felt something strange, relief mixed with guilt for feeling relieved. She was free from confusion, fear, guilt, and I was free from deciding whether to forgive her. How do you judge someone who can no longer defend herself? Roberta wanted a traditional funeral. The Delgados refused to attend. In the end, we held a small ceremony, just Roberto, me, and a few friends from the nursing home. I didn't mention Javier or Sofia. It felt like I was living 2 parallel lives that would never truly meet. At the cemetery, as they lowered her casket, I realized I would never know the full story, never know what she thought in that hospital hallway, never know if she truly regretted it. After the funeral, I had to deal with the inheritance. Roberto wanted to pretend none of this happened and proceed as planned. But I couldn't. I offered the Delgados $60,000 from the inheritance, an acknowledgement of their family's suffering. Sofia rejected it instantly. She said, "We don't want that woman's money." But Javier accepted. Not, I think, for the money, but because he needed closure, some tangible form of justice after 58 years. Roberto didn't speak to me for 2 months. He called me a traitor, said I was spitting on Mom's grave, and maybe he was right. Or maybe I was just trying to do the closest thing to right in a situation where right didn't exist, only pain, no matter the path. It's been 6 months since Mom died, and I still don't know who I really am. Some days I wake up as Meredith Sanchez, following my routines, living my familiar life. Other days I feel the weight of being Rosalie Delgado, the lost daughter found too late to meet her parents. I see Javier and Sophia once a month. We're building a relationship slowly, carefully, as if walking on thin ice. Roberto eventually forgave me, or at least decided our bond mattered more than his pride. I still teach at the same school, I still live in the same house, but everything feels different, like I'm acting a role I no longer fully fit. The truth changed everything and changed nothing at the same time. Maybe that's how it has to be. Maybe it's okay not to have answers. Maybe it's okay to live in the space between two identities, belonging fully to neither, partially to both. To learn day by day that humanity itself lives in contradictions, in secrets, in painful truths that both destroy and free us. My mother stole me and loved me. Both things are true, and I have to learn to live with them.